Donald Trump might not want to break out his birthday party hats just yet after an emergency lawsuit was filed to keep his UFC cage match / birthday party from going forward on Sunday. Deadline White House's legal blogger Jordan Rubin writes this about the lawsuit, quote, "A volcano of corruption is what plaintiffs suing to stop this weekend's UFC fights at the White House called the planned event, telling a judge that President Donald Trump and his allies are poised to profit, quote, from the first private, for-profit sporting event ever held on White House grounds. The event will feature million-dollar VIP packages, brand placement opportunities adjacent to the Lincoln Memorial, and an exclusive broadcast on the president's favorite streaming service," plaintiffs told the judge. Such a volcano of corruption, if allowed to go forward, will mark an inflection point in American history. The images it generates will one day appear in the history books and not in the chapters about times remembered fondly. We could hear from the judge on that anytime. I want to bring in Brendan Ballou. He's the founder of the Public Integrity Project, as well as a former special counsel in the Justice Department. He represents the plaintiffs in the UFC lawsuit. Mike and John are still with us. Brendan, take me through the lawsuit and what happens if the judge rules in your favor.
Yeah. So the basic issue here is this is not a lawsuit about a fight. It is a lawsuit about corruption. Right now, what's happening is the UFC and its parent company TKO are selling what are called sponsorship packages for $1 million to $1.5 million per person. Plus, they're giving exclusive licensing for showing the title card to Paramount, which is closely allied to the president, and showing ads at the White House lawn and potentially even at the Lincoln Memorial. So we're already seeing ads, for instance, for Monster Energy drink. We're expecting ads for Crypto.com and others. All of this is a way for the UFC and for Donald Trump, who's invested in that company, to make a private profit from public property. That is the fundamental problem here. So that's why we've sued. In terms of what could happen here, this is before Judge Mehta. He is going to rule based on the briefings. And it's either that the fight could get enjoined, or at the very least, if he finds that the plaintiffs have standing, that the sort of most corrupt aspects of this could be reduced. So, for instance, the walkout that's scheduled at the Lincoln Memorial for the UFC could potentially be canceled or moved.
Mike, what's interesting about the UFC birthday party / cage match is that about a quarter of Trump's base is into it. The question was asked by Reuters, is it appropriate for Trump to hold the UFC match? Just 16% of respondents said yes. Even Trump's worst poll, he comes in around 34%. So that's not a third of Trump's existing base that thinks it's appropriate for Donald Trump to have erected this monstrosity on the White House lawn and decided to host this UFC fight there.
Look, I don't think that most Americans would have a problem with a professional sport having an event on the South Lawn of the White House. At the end of the day, it's, we all celebrate sports together. We all sort of look to them as a way of unifying each other and such. I think what changes people's views about it is that if it's done for corruption, and if it's done for reasons that are enriching the president or people around the president, and they're using the office of the presidency to do that. Like if Major League Baseball had a game on the South Lawn of the White House, like in the same way that they have a game at the Field of Dreams field in Iowa once a year, I'm not sure that that's that big a deal. But the problem with what's happened here is that it gets lopped in with everything else that Trump has done. And there is a sustained body of evidence and a narrative about how Trump has used the office to enrich himself, and people around him have done that. So when they have an event like this on the South Lawn of the White House, the average person looks at it and says, okay, is this truly a celebration of American sport, of the country, of people coming together to watch an event, or is it a way to make money? And there's a reason, ethics experts will tell you, that people in power should not engage in anything where it looks like they're making money, because it raises larger questions about what they're doing in other areas. Can we trust what an elected official is doing if they are, if there are accusations that they are making money at the time? So people look at this and they say, okay, what's really going on here? And I think that's probably one of the reasons that there's skepticism about it.
It's an extraordinary number, though, Heilman. I mean, it is around the approval rating for Donald Trump's performance on the economy. Actually, that's 5 points lower. That's 9%.
Well, I'll say a few things about this. One of which is, I think when you see those pictures, it's another sign to a lot of Americans that Donald Trump's not focused on them and their issues. It's like when you see that thing being that this is what he's doing right now, like, you know,
because this is all that he's doing. Right.
He's not bringing, but it's just a vivid symbol. It's like tearing down the White House ballroom. There are people who object to that because they love the White House and they look at that, it looks like Six Flags. It's like it's tacky as hell. But it's kind of like, what's the president doing? He's planning a cage match. He's tearing down there used to be a rose garden there, by the way.
Incredible.
You know, it's just absolutely incredible. But he's tearing down the East Wing. He's trying to build the Arc de Triomphe. It's just all these things that have nothing to do with what voters actually care about, you know, which is like, why are my prices going so high? And why is he just seems focused on all of these things that are really about spectacle and self-aggrandizement. And yes, self-enrichment too, but it's just sort of like he's distracted, not paying attention to my business. I also think that there's an element of this which is kind of like the thing. We're in this great moment. We'll come back to the Knicks. We're in this great moment where the glory of the part, as we were saying before, part of the reason that sports is so powerful is that it's a thing that's not infected by politics. It's a thing where politics and sports always get commingled, but it's still the case that you can go to a Knicks game and you can be rooting for the Knicks or for the Spurs, and you don't know. The guy next to you could be MAGA, the guy next to you could be super woke.
For 3 hours, nobody cares.
Yeah, you're at a Mets game and you're rooting for the Mets, and no one's asking each other, hey, are you on Team Blue or are you on Team Red?
Right.
It's like the safe space where you can go and just care about a different tribe, not like the political, ideological. People are like sick of having politics.
Totally.
Infect absolutely everything, and Trump has done a lot of that. And this is just another. It's like, oh, really? I got like, even if you like this particular brand of sport, you're kind of like, why does Donald Trump have to have his nose in this? Why does it have to be Trumpified? Why does UFC have to be? He goes to these matches, and I know he gets applause, but I think for most Americans, they look at it and go, it's like, why is Donald Trump sticking his nose in this particular thing? And then the third thing I'll say very quickly is that the thing that sport, as Mike said just now, quoting Mitt Romney, sport must worry about right now is the sense that like financialization of it is taking over. Yeah. And in between the betting, and as you listed at the beginning of what this is about, it's like, here's the platinum sponsor, and here's the this, and here's the that, and here's the gold-plated this, and here's the VIP access, and here's this package, that package. It's like, it's the one thing about the Knicks that bums out real Knicks fans is like, nobody in the city can afford to go to a Knicks finals game or any of these playoff games. There are many thousands of dollars to get even a seat up in the rafters. No one can afford to go to the World Cup, which is a thing that people were really looking forward to. And now you look at it, it's $6,000, it's $18,000, $12,000 for a seat way up in the nosebleed section to go to a World Cup match. Why are people not excited about the World Cup? Feels like it's overpriced. And this is another thing where it's like, it's just the melding of sport and just financializing. Money. It's all about,
profit,
companies and rich people and all that stuff. It just makes people a little bit nauseous, I think.
I mean, Brendan, when do you expect a decision? And what do you make of their arguments? They were all about the fighters already dropping weight to make their weigh-ins.
Yeah. So the decision could come out any minute, could come out tonight, could come out tomorrow. I think a number of their arguments were just exceptionally weak. You alluded to one of them, which is saying that they are worried about the harm to the fighters if this fight were delayed, given that they're cutting weight and they might have to cut weight indefinitely. I don't think that's the case. If they reschedule the fight, they can just, go back to normal living and then cut weight when you get closer to the fight. I think it's very hard for the government to argue that it's complying with the law here. And in fact, it reversed itself a couple times on what it was doing specifically at the Lincoln Memorial. So this all comes down to a fight over standing, whether the plaintiffs are the kind of people who can bring suit here. I will just say, also, at the risk of being a little repetitive, this isn't a fight over MMA. In fact, I want to shout out my colleague, Sam Ward-Packard, who really was the architect of this case. He's a huge MMA fan. But to go back to these earlier points, this is such a corruption of the sport when you have such obvious profiteering from public property for an event like this.
We're tracking these reports of absolute chaos and infighting in the Trump White House. There is a lot of concern about the basically seemingly accurate reporting in the New York Times about the Epstein crisis inside the White House, but Donald Trump pushing back on that because I guess he's mad that the story is public. Washington also waking up to this type of headline. Knives are out inside an insular and isolated White House. Political reporting on the angry and grievance-driven Trump White House mood these days, with one ally saying knives are out in some capacity. People are stabbing people like it's chaos, the chaos creeping back. Another MAGA political operative quoted as saying Trump is pissed, and people are not recognizing the level of pissed that he is. It all comes back to Epstein, a story that we've reported and told you they have not been able to stem, including high-profile testimony this week and that New York Times bombshell, which is part of a forthcoming book that probably has more details because this was just an excerpt. The Times reporting the rather unusual, somewhat embarrassing detail that they misused the National Security Situation Room to spin Epstein. The response here, instead of shoot the messenger, it's find the leaker, a reported massive leak probe into who might have been talking to those journalists. You'll note, though, that a leak probe implies there are real people who said real things to the journalists. In other words, that the story was basically true, right? They want to find their own aides who are still in the White House who talked to the reporters. Meanwhile, the inflation numbers that are coming in show that the inability to stem or end the ceasefire and the war in Iran continues to catch up with America and Trump at home. Price gains have wiped out the pay increases that Americans have even gotten over the past year on average. So this is some of that economic math, but the bottom line is if you adjust for inflation, your hourly earnings, all Americans' hourly earnings are actually lower. They've effectively fallen because of Trump's inflation. Now, Trump says he loves the inflation. I guess that's something he does not have in common with the American worker. And there are other statements which, from someone who has focused on PR, who is known to be a communicator, have raised wider questions about why any politician, including the incumbent president, would say that he doesn't ever even think about your financial situation, or that he doesn't care about what you do and vote in the upcoming midterms, or, as mentioned, that he loves inflation.
Mr. President, to what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody.
I don't care about the midterms.
Are you concerned, Mr. President, about the latest inflation number which came out this morning? Could that be a
No, I love it. The numbers were great. You know what I really love? I love the inflation.
He loves it. Meanwhile, in private, there are oil executives warning the White House that the gas price problem is only going to get worse. The Washington Post reporting on what were essentially private warnings. Americans paying at the pump. Federal workers, meanwhile, are preparing to host the UFC ring there at the White House. We have new footage. We should mention Trump also owns stock in the company behind this fight. Critics questioning whether this is part of the ongoing grift and that it doesn't end there, as the Trump family is trying to make money by selling a $12,000 commemorative gold coin that connects with this unusual fight that Donald Trump wants to hold at the White House, which is a type of focus and energy going to this instead of, governing the war, high prices. Jimmy Kimmel having a field day.
The Trump family is offering a special commemorative coin with his head on it for this UFC event for the low, low price of only $11,999.99. You can see, though, it's a beautiful coin. Julius U.F. Caesar is pictured.
If you forget the last many years of politics, if you go back to, say, 2014, 2013, before Trump was even really floating this run, it's like the Simpsons episode that imagined it, or any other cartoon. The fact that it's really kind of the most absurd version of Donald Trump, hawking the coins and the products and the wrestling and the reality TV gambits. The type of thing that you wouldn't think he would need to do. He's in the second term. He has no more elections to run. He could try to, at times, focus on other things. But this is who he is. He was not going to change. He has shown America who he is. And so that's the weird moment we're in, living through a summer where people are actually having to cancel, reschedule, change their weekly plans, the vacation they were going to drive to the lake for because gas is too expensive. And whatever gains, as I mentioned, they got in hourly wages have been wiped out by Trump inflation, including the gas crunch that is only a direct product of a war that he started that nobody seemed to want in America, and that he certainly didn't run on, and he certainly didn't get Congress to clear. And so against the backdrop of these serious problems, foreign and domestic, you have Trump selling coins and doing these reality TV ploys. And you might say, okay, well, the news is reporting on that, but, you know, that's who he is and that's how he got elected and that's his appeal. Well, it's not his appeal anymore. He has historically low second-term approval ratings. He is at a low enough approval that statistically a heck of a lot of people who have voted for him in the past now disapprove of him. So maybe the shtick and the campaign moves and the antics that did get attention in our political attention economy during campaign season aren't actually turning out in a way that the American public wants. And that's before you even get to the aging president's physical stamina. Now, this is the type of story we reported on regarding the last president, who happened to be a Democrat, and this president, who happens to be a Republican. What they have in common is what has become a big kind of ongoing issue in sclerotic Washington, which is a lot of people who are way past retirement age, continuing to do their jobs or do them as best they can. Trump, again, being seen in what looks like a public nap, and not at a kind of quiet end-of-the-night kind of event. This was actually at the loud, action-packed Knicks-Spurs game. Today there is reporting that he saw 22 different medical specialists as part of his last checkup. Now, if you have good health care, and everybody would want the president to have, of course, the best there is, you can see as many specialists as you want. The question is whether this relates to other issues and a lack of transparency in the White House. There are questions from outside physicians who said they were skeptical of the disclosures about his health. And remember, when you are president, you give up some of that personal health security that most Americans have. In other words, it's not your employer's business or anyone's business if you don't want to share. But that's not the case with the president. There is a long and important standard of the president and the White House sharing the medical exams and other information because it is a national security issue and a matter of public import. If you ask the public, though, well, Americans are concerned that he may no longer be physically and mentally fit enough for the job. And that is a backdrop that might remind you of why Biden ultimately exited the race, because those kind of problems, those numbers are very hard to reverse. And while Donald Trump isn't running for office, his party, of course, is up in the midterms, and Republicans are watching their odds get worse. Larry Sabato is a renowned elections forecaster. He sees Republicans struggling and Democrats surging in several Senate races. Take it all together, and what do you have here? A kind of a doomsday of problems. We didn't have to be at war. Trump started the war. So we didn't have to have a gas crunch. The war caused that. We didn't have to have an Epstein crisis that lasted this long in America. If Donald Trump had done just what he said he would do and immediately released the files, it wouldn't have taken this long. And ironically, it may redound against his benefit and hurt the Republicans that here deep into the summer, we're still looking at that issue, the reporting, him hunting the Epstein leaker, more witnesses going before Congress because Trump's DOJ did not do the investigations that they should have and said they would. And you don't have to take the news's word for it. You can get that take from Megyn and Tucker and the right-wing podcasts. So all of this has congealed into a problem for the Republicans going into the midterms and potentially for Donald Trump as he looks at a nation that increasingly sees him as unfit and off the path Americans want.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It has been 103 days since Donald Trump took us to war with Iran, and we've had about 103 different proclamations from the man that the war is over, or it's back on, or we have a deal, or that we're about to have a deal, or that we're bombing them again. It's obvious to pretty much the entire world at this point that he has no idea what he's doing. Today, we got all of the above in the space of a few hours. First came the bombing. Yesterday, a U.S. precision strike destroyed a drinking water facility, according to New York Times analysis, a facility that serves 20,000 people, according to the Iranian government, as temperatures have reached well over 100 degrees this week. It is unclear if the U.S. intentionally hit the facility, but of course, targeting civilian infrastructure is a war crime if it was done deliberately. Another U.S. strike on a tanker reportedly killed 3 Indian nationals and left dozens more in the water seeking rescue. The U.S. said the ship ran the U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The Indian government has protested. Then Trump called into Fox this morning to brag that the U.S. dropped $250 million of bombs on Iran last night and to promise more.
Yeah, there will be more bombing tonight. It'll be a bigger, more powerful. They're finished. We can walk in there tomorrow. We could take soldiers. I don't want to have boots on the ground, but if I wanted to, we could put a small group of soldiers and take over the whole place. They're finished. We dropped $250 million worth of bombs on them last night. You know, the whole thing is crazy. But and they're really in submission. They just don't know it yet.
For as long as I have covered politics in this country, somehow spending on the military, government spending on bombs just doesn't count. Oh, we dropped $250 million bombs last night. The Iranian government responded by promising retaliatory strikes outside the Middle East. And then, just 3 hours before the U.S. was set to launch massive strikes, according to NBC News, Trump announced, actually, the war is over.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents, which should get done over the next few days. We'll probably have a signing maybe in Europe.
And has the Supreme Leader approved this deal, sir?
I understand the answer is yes.
I understand the answer is yes. Now, would it surprise you to learn that is not true? A senior Iranian official tells MS Now Iran has not agreed to anything. State media reported the same thing, but oil prices fell and stocks rose on Trump's guarantees. That's pretty much exactly what happened the nearly 40 previous times Donald Trump promised a peace deal was this close. This whole thing has been impossible to follow, even for professionals like us that have to follow it for a living. The fundamental issue here is that there is a real crisis. It is produced by Donald Trump with help from Netanyahu. There are real bombs falling, real people dying, like the Iranian schoolgirls whose school was destroyed on the first day of Trump's war by American weapons, and the 13 American service members who died, and the Indians who died at sea, and not to mention the drinking water plants being bombed in the past day. Attacks the military called self-defense strikes, and retaliation for downing of a U.S. helicopter. All of this is real, except to Donald Trump, who is incapable of seeing it, this crisis, as anything other than a PR issue. And he cannot understand why his incessant self-contradictory jawboning isn't getting him better press.
Behind the scenes, I will tell you, they won't even dispute it, although they probably would because it makes sense. They're very good. Iran is very good at publicity, but they're not good at fighting. But I took a look, and I must tell you, they can't believe the press they're getting. They can't even believe it. Yeah. And they told me, they said, it's amazing how well we're doing in the papers. We're not doing so well. They're negotiating with us to make a deal.
Please, everyone, just take a second with this. The Iranians call Donald Trump in the midst of a war as they're bombing each other to tell Donald Trump secretly, between you and me, you guys are doing so well, we're doing so terribly. I can't believe the press you're getting. Did they really tell you this? They can't believe how well they're doing in the papers, they told me? Did they? Is that a real thing that happened? Are the Iranians in the room right now, sir? And remember, we have seen this before. I think a lot of us blocked it out because it was such a traumatic year of our lives. But this is exactly what happened with COVID. During COVID, Trump was constitutionally incapable of distinguishing between the political and PR problem that COVID and the associated disruptions posed for him and the actual virus, and actually combating that to the point where he didn't want to test for the virus because he didn't like the headlines.
So the media likes to say we have the most cases, but we do by far the most testing. If we did very little testing, we wouldn't have the most cases. So in a way, by doing all of this testing, we make ourselves look bad. If you don't test, you don't have any cases. If we stop testing right now, we'd have very few cases, if any.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
It was a literal virus, a deadly virus, not a PR crisis. It killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. And now, once again, we have a situation where his PR strategy is what's driving everything right now, or at least this morning it was to keep bombing, to try to fabricate a peace deal he can sell, crucially, as something better than the Obama nuclear treaty. That's what this whole thing is about. Again, real people, real lives, real destruction, real spikes in gas prices. But Trump wants a deal that makes him look better than Obama or a total conquest of Iran. And absent that, he just wants a few minutes or a few hours of some good press just to get him through. Again, whatever makes the headlines good. And here's how you know that. When you have serious talks, negotiations about nuclear disarmament, as the U.S. did under Obama, there are, you wouldn't be surprised to hear, extremely complicated, painstaking and obscure technical discussions that have to happen over months with nuclear scientists like Ernest Moniz. I mean, he literally ran the MIT physics department. He was also Obama's Secretary of Energy. He was a linchpin in the Iran nuclear deal in the negotiating team. As talks went on for more than a year, Obama sent Moniz to discuss the technical details of an agreement directly with the Iranian nuclear energy minister, who you see on the far right in this photo. 2 months later, the U.S. had a deal. Negotiators say the physicists speaking to each other were integral to that because, as one White House official put it, they treated these matters as scientific problems. This is how serious administrations tackle serious diplomacy on this very important high-stakes technical issue. While the Trump administration leaves it to these guys, presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner and billionaire donor Stephen Witkoff. Just last week, Kushner and Witkoff finally traveled down to the National Nuclear Lab in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to consult with experts who could possibly play a role in negotiations with Iran, according to Axios. Possibly. After 4 months of saying a deal is at hand. Now they are, for the first time, meeting with their uranium enrichment experts, none of whom apparently work in Washington. These are not serious people. They did get Axios to quote a U.S. official as saying the meeting was a sign the negotiations are a very serious phase. Oh, they flew down to Tennessee to be like, run me through this whole enrichment thing. And then what happened? What happened after that? After the reporting about how close we are? We're exactly where we were when Trump launched this war, except, again, for the death and the destruction, which have continued through this ostensible ceasefire, and, of course, the price of gas, which is still above $4 a gallon, which is driving inflation, which has wiped out all wage gains under Donald Trump. I have no idea what happens next. I hope there is a deal. I don't want there to be war. And no one knows what happens next, certainly not Donald Trump. But what is clear is the fundamental goal here is to emerge with a PR win. Nothing about the substance. He's lying and he's blustering and he's using the tools of life and death. Real people raining down destruction, bringing global commerce to a halt, all in the desperate search for good publicity.
Moments ago, the president announcing Jay Clayton, the former SEC chair, as the nominee to be Director of National Intelligence. Let's bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rode following this breaking news, and MS Now legal analyst Catherine Christian also with us. David, tell us the latest on this kind of surprise nomination.
It is a surprise nomination. Jay Clayton is a prosecutor. I believe is currently the Southern District prosecutor in New York. That's Manhattan and part of Westchester County. I don't believe he has a large amount of intelligence experience. And my key question is when he would take office, because the real concern surrounding Bill Pulte has to do with any actions he might take regarding the midterm elections. But I would say this is a step forward. He's a better nominee, sort of really speaking off the top of my head, than Bill Pulte, and that he has a lot of experience as a lawyer and a prosecutor. But the question here is the timing. I just think Bill Pulte should not be an acting director of national intelligence or serving in any form in such a powerful and important office.
I do want to get to Bill Pulte and to the potential lack of experience in intel, Catherine. But first, let me just read what President Trump put on Truth Social announcing this. I am pleased to announce the nomination of very highly respected Jay Clayton, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the former head of Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most prominent and successful law firms anywhere in the world, and the current United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, to be the next Director of National Intelligence, and importantly, to serve in my cabinet. I'll leave the rest for the viewers to read. But Catherine, speak to who this person is. Who is Jay Clayton?
Well, the president is right. He is a very highly respected attorney. He was chair of the SEC. He was a partner at Sullivan Cromwell. I don't know, it was the best law firm in the world, but it's a highly respected law firm. And he's the current United States attorney for the Southern District of New York. But federal law requires that this position be given to someone with extensive national security experience. And it doesn't appear that Jay Clayton has that. Clearly, he is a very competent, highly qualified attorney and qualified to be the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. It's not clear about that requirement of extensive national security experience.
David, is there any sense for why now? You know, we had Bill Pulte's name echoing in the ether. Clearly, Republicans were incensed. Some Republicans, I should say, were incensed by him as acting DNI. So why now?
This is a victory for Democrats in Congress who held up Section 702, the approval of that very important tool to the intelligence community. Some say it's too important, in a way, too powerful. But this is a law that allows the U.S. To surveil. It's a communications between foreigners and Americans. And so during these kind of sweeps, when they collect it's a lot of NSA eavesdropping, they can obtain the communications of Americans who are conversing with foreigners. And so there are complaints from both the left and the right about that should be a more thorough process to protect Americans' privacy. But what Trump has done here is back down. We have the president backing down again. You could argue earlier today he sort of backed down to Iran. He's now backing down to Democrats because Section 702 was going to expire. And there were deep fears about not having that tool would make it, more difficult for the intelligence community to see terrorist threats and many other threats to the United States.
I want to bring in David Drucker of the Dispatch. David, let's talk about the political implications of this. You have David Rode mentioning that this is a victory for Democrats who have pressured on FISA. How will Republicans view this? Will they be breathing a sigh of relief, or are they still going to have concerns about Jay Clayton in this role?
Well, we're going to have to see how Senate Republicans react to Clayton and his qualifications or lack thereof per the statute, which was laid out very expertly there. But I think this has to be seen as the president acquiescing to the wishes of the United States Senate, which needs to confirm any new DNI. There was a bipartisan dissatisfaction with Bill Pulte, just feeling like he was not only was he not a national security expert or professional, but that he wasn't up to the job and was too partisan of an individual. And what you're getting with Clayton is a lawyer and somebody who can theoretically, sell himself and present as nonpartisan, which is something that Tulsi Gabbard didn't present when she was confirmed. And I think that the president moving so quickly to Jay Clayton after promoting Mr. Pulte and saying, look, he'll be there for a while because there are things that he wanted Pulte to do, and he talked about that, I think shows that the pressure he was under, both with the reauthorization of FISA, but just general unhappiness from Republicans as well as Democrats in the Senate. I just say, one side note here, for some Republicans, they feel that 20 plus years on, the DNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, has outlived its usefulness, and they wouldn't mind seeing it go away. Clearly, the president wants to fill this position, and I think that he had to move away from Pulte. I think the interesting thing is that he did it so quickly and didn't send Pulte on his fact-finding missions in the intelligence community, which he had said was very important to him just a couple of days ago.
Why do you think that is? Why so quickly? I mean, it's an outstanding question. Was it the pressure from House Speaker Mike Johnson, who met with him 2 times, allegedly, on this? It was the House Speaker who met with him. He wasn't meeting with Senator Thune. Do you see, Congress pressuring the president on this? Is that how this worked?
Well, I don't know that. I think we need to look at this more as a U.S. Senate issue, simply because they have confirmation authority here, right? And they were the ones that were unhappy, and they were the ones that were I'd call it subtly applying pressure, right? I mean, usually the way you get Trump to reverse course, if you're a Republican, is not to go after him directly, but just sort of, make it known that you're unhappy with this and you think the president's agenda would be served better if the president himself would make a different choice. And I just think there was enough unhappiness among Republicans that it wasn't just the Democratic opposition. I think we also have to, as David Rowe just mentioned here, and I think this was important, there's a deep concern that FISA is going to expire. And we don't think about this much, but the reason the FISA court was created in the aftermath of 9/11 is we just felt like we were not keeping tabs on all of these bubbling and percolating threats that could turn into terrorist acts if we don't ferret them out first. And so even though FISA has lost favor among the public to some degree, the U.S. government, under both Democrats and Republicans, has found it to be a very important national security tool.
I want to bring in MS Now White House reporter Laura Barone-Lopez. Laura, any sense for why the whiplash on this? Why did this happen now?
I think, well, ultimately, as both David Rowe and David Drucker said, this comes down to the fact that the president was squeezed. He obviously wanted Bill Pulte, that's someone who was a loyalist, someone that the president has trusted, who has had the ear of the president for quite some time now, even sometimes to the dismay of others in the president's circle inside the White House. They haven't always liked how much Bill Pulte has been able to talk to the president and do the president's bidding and encourage the president to go after his perceived enemies and say that he would do it on his behalf. Now, the big question here, so ultimately, Ariel, to answer your question, it came down to, I think, the fact that FISA, that warrantless surveillance law, was going to expire on Friday, as well as the fact that Pulte likely was not going to get confirmed. Now, when it comes to Jay Clayton, the big question is whether or not he is going to carry out as much of the president's bidding as Pulte would have. Now, just yesterday, the president was talking about the fact that he wanted some downsizing of the national intelligence apparatus, something that Tulsi Gabbard had already been doing, had fired a number of people across her agency, but that was something that the president wanted to see done. There's also the question of elections and voting systems and election security, which the president has repeated those false claims over and over again, saying that the American elections are rigged and not safe. That was something Pulte also spread. And Jay Clayton just recently, talking to, I believe it was CNBC, kind of repeated some of that, saying in an interview that he thought questions about election integrity were valid and that it was something worth looking at, and that there were essentially casting doubt about the security of American elections. So one big question I'm sure some senators are going to have, especially people like Lisa Murkowski and others who don't support President Trump's continuation of these conspiracy theories, is what Jay Clayton is actually going to do and whether or not he is going to try to take a hands-on approach when it comes to election systems in the way that Tulsi Gabbard was starting to, Ariel.
So, David Drucker, hearing Laura Barone-Lopez's reporting there, is it your sense that this is what tipped the scales in Jay Clayton's favor, that he was willing to express some degree of skepticism in election integrity?
Well, look, we know that that's always important to President Trump, right? I mean, he wants his top officials, he wants all of his officials to parrot his conspiracy theories or his views as he sees them. His views on the 2020 election and elections that he does not win are conspiracies because when he's lost, he's lost. I think the question here is in a confirmation hearing, does Mr. Clayton talk about wanting to examine election security and do things to beef up election security within the law and in ways that do not impinge on states' rights? And in our system, states have purview over elections, not the federal government, in terms of how they are administered. Or is he going to begin talking about a desire to look back at previous elections, namely the 2020 election, and take over where Tulsi Gabbard left off, showing up in Georgia or Arizona or anywhere else, asking for ballots and wanting answers as to, this or that conspiracy? There is a difference here, right? I mean, there is a role for the federal government to play to make sure the elections are secure from foreign interference. And both the first Trump administration and the Biden administration had departments and officials that did that work. The question is, are we looking backward, trying to create proof that doesn't exist, or is he simply going to talk about doing the job that the federal government is supposed to do?
You know that feeling, we've all had this feeling, when you buy a cute pair of shoes or something like that you saw on Instagram, and then they show up and you wear them for a day or two, and they're just not what you hoped they'd be. Or when you buy a movie ticket and halfway through the show, you think to yourself, ugh, I should have stayed home or maybe gone to see a different movie. We've all been there. We've all had versions of buyer's remorse. And right now, it feels a lot like a lot of Trump voters are entering their very own buyer's remorse era. I mean, think about it this way. Back in 2024, Trump won the support of 81% of voters who ranked the economy as their number one issue. He won 81% of them. Or he won. That was their big issue. But fast forward to present time. And a new poll out just this week found that a record 63% of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy. Just take a look at this chart. That's just it. There it is, right on the screen. The light red line at the top that you can see right there is Trump's economic approval rating during his first term. It's essentially hovering around the same place the whole time. Pretty consistent. That dark red line you can see kind of on the one side of the screen is Trump's economic approval rating during his second term. And as you can see there, it's basically plummeting off of a cliff. And it's not just the economy that is driving feelings of buyer's remorse for Trump voters. I mean, Trump ran for president repeatedly promising that as president, he wouldn't get us into any new wars. A promise, by the way, he now insists that he never made.
One of your consistent campaign promises was no new wars, going all the way back to 2015. Did you break that promise to the American people?
No.
Under Trump, we will have no more wars.
I didn't guarantee no war. If Trump comes back, you won't have any wars. You won't have any wars. So, when you say I promised, I didn't promise anything. They said he will start a war. I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars.
Trump absolutely did promise repeatedly that he would not start any new wars. It was kind of a shtick he said all the time. He also promised that he was the great deal maker and that he could negotiate an end to any conflict. That was also part of his regular shtick. But now he's failing on both counts. I mean, for the past 2 days, we watched Trump's ceasefire with Iran fall apart as the two countries resumed fighting. Then this morning, Trump once again teased a big, devastating strike against Iran and threatened to take over their oil industry, only to back away at the last second, claiming once again that a peace deal was imminent. There is no imminent peace deal, clearly. Now, tonight he's claiming that Iran is ready to sign a deal with while Iranian officials are publicly denying any such thing. The man is basically stuck and in way over his head. That is very clear more than 100 days into this war. It's the same thing we've seen over and over and over again since the beginning of this conflict. And the people who bought Trump's no new wars pledge now also have buyer's remorse. In that same new poll I mentioned earlier, almost the entire country, a full 92% of voters, say they think the war will last another month or longer, rejecting Trump's claim that an end to the war is imminent. And 2/3 of Americans, 67%, think Trump has been ineffective in negotiating with Iran. When it comes to Trump and his policies, there are signs of buyer's remorse basically everywhere you look. People who voted for him who are thinking, this isn't what I voted for, or this isn't what I want. Even take the things Trump himself is excited about, like the big UFC fight he's planning to host on the South Lawn of the White House for his 80th birthday on Sunday. A new Reuters Ipsos poll found that only 16% of Americans think it's appropriate for Trump to hold that event, which means that most of the people who voted for him are not on board with his big birthday party. And we're seeing that kind of buyer's remorse is not only evident in the polls, but also in conversations with real people in places that were key to Trump's victory. In states like Ohio, for example, which have become so red in the last several years, it almost felt outside the grasp of Democrats, like Democrats are being unrealistic and trying to compete in the state. I mean, in the 2020 election, he won it by 8 points, Trump did. Then in 2024, he won Ohio by 11 points, in large part because of repeated promises to boost the economy and bring back manufacturing jobs. No more shipping jobs overseas. But guess what? That's exactly where Ohio's jobs are going. In January, several Ohio factories announced plans to close, including this Conn-Selmer instrument plant in Eastlake, the one you can see there on your screen. The plant's billionaire owner, John Paulson, a close ally of Trump, I would note, offshored all of those jobs to China. Annette Dombrowski is a 3-time Trump voter and a janitor at that Eastlake, Ohio plant. At the end of the month, on June 30th, she's going to be officially out of a job. MS Now reporter Alex Tebbett went to her house this week and asked her how she felt when she was laid off and whether she thinks Trump understands what she is going through.
I actually have panic attacks. I've had a couple this past week. And I get very emotional over it. I don't want to work anymore, but I can't afford to retire.
Obviously, President Trump is immensely wealthy, has been wealthy since he was born.
Yeah.
Do you think he understands?
No. No. He hasn't lived it to understand it. He sees it, he has not lived it. He needs to live it. Wear the clothes, wear the shoes, wear your Walmart clothes, wear your Walmart shoes. Do your thrift store shopping. Don't eat steaks. I don't get to go out to dinner. It's not an overnight thing, but it's been 2 years now. You said you'd bring down the grocery prices. Literally, I must be the most angry person when I grocery shop because I buy the same things every week, and I see it jump every week. It is not every couple months. It's literally every week.
Our reporter Alex Tebbett also spoke with another 3-time Trump voter, a man named Chris Tackett, a trucker from Ohio, who expressed deep frustration with Trump's broken promises.
When President Trump said he wasn't going to start foreign wars, when he said he was going to bring down prices, did you believe him?
Yeah. I mean, his first term, I think he held true to everything that he said he was going to do. I think he fought for everything he said he was going to fight for. This time around, I haven't seen it. He's backtracked on every single pitch point he had during his election. He's backtracking on. All we heard was drill during the election, and now all we're getting is drilled into the dirt with these prices. So I'm not a fan of him. I voted for Trump all 3 terms. To be honest with you, I'm not a big supporter of him at this point.
3-time Trump voter. I'm not a big supporter of him at this point, is what he had to say. Now, that Ohio voter also had another message for Trump.
If you could talk directly to President Trump, what would you tell him right now?
Get it together, man. The average American is struggling to make ends meet right now. And nobody wants to hear the war's almost over. Nobody wants to hear it's going to get better. You've had a year to make it better at this point. Make it better. Make America great again, right?
More than a year, to be exact. And there was also a 1-time Trump voter who had a more explicit message for Trump, which I think kind of encapsulates the buyer's remorse we've been seeing lately on a number of issues.
If you could talk to President Trump directly right now, what would you tell him?
Should you want me to really say it on air? I say you. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to any leader, but he's disrespectful to us, and he doesn't care. So
he's disrespectful to us, and he doesn't care. That again, a guy who voted for Trump. Trump's disrespect for his own supporters is essentially destroying the coalition that put him in the White House to begin with. And it's not just voters he's pushing away. It's also Republican politicians who have loyally supported his agenda, sometimes embarrassingly loyal. Now, Trump upended his party's plans last month when he decided to snub Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas and endorse his scandal-plagued primary opponent, Ken Paxton, who then defeated Cornyn. Now, for the first time since his bitter primary loss, John Cornyn is putting his own Trump buyer's remorse on full display in a new interview with the New York Times. And among other things, he's predicting that Trump's final 2 years in office will be the most miserable of his life. And he's warning that, quote, I think it's going to be a pretty bumpy ride for the next 7 months, which is, of course, referring to the remainder of Cornyn's own term in office. Cornyn also made reference to the famous incident in the Oval Office where Trump berated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, saying, as the president told President Zelensky when he was in his office a year or so ago, he said, you don't have any cards. Well, we've got some cards to play. There we go. And when asked about Trump's post-election claim that Cornyn would remain his friend, Cornyn told The Times, if that's the way friends treat you, you wonder about his enemies. Hell hath no wrath like a Republican scorned, I guess.